Welcome. Today we're talking about personal development plans. A bit of a bugbear of mine that people struggle to use them effectively or just don't even try. I think there's a whole um, mindset around personal development plans that they're a lot of effort, and we just don't have time to do them, or people invest time in doing development plans but then sort of don't really bring them to life. So hopefully I'm going to show you over the next hour um, the best way to construct a development plan, but also that it isn't that much work, it isn't that much effort, and actually keeping it simple and making it as easy as you can for yourself is the way to make sure it lasts. Better to have a simpler development plan with less on it than try and have lots on there and not achieve any of it. So that's going to be one of the key things I'll reference throughout, really. But this is what I'm going to be covering. I'm going to look at the purpose of personal development. Why is it such an important thing? Um, Career planning. I think before we can get to our own development plans, we need to understand what those development plans need to support. And that's going to be two things, really. It's about our career, where we want to go, but also the business and the goals that we're supporting. So we'll look at sort of how we think about our career, and also think about um, how we set those, how we look at the goals it's supporting. There's lots of benefits for development plans. It helps us have those meaningful conversations. It helps us prioritize. It helps us work as part of a team. But ultimately, it helps us improve our performance and help recognize how we can support other people, but also the business goals. Um, and this is the I guess the flow of performance development that um, really brings it to life for me. This is a really simplistic way of understanding how personal development plans support us. So we've got career goals and company goals, which are the end result we're trying to achieve. Right, we're trying to achieve um, success for ourselves, but success for the business as well. And the way that normally breaks down is with the company goals. They're then translated to some sort of department goals, some sort of regional goals, whatever it might be, that support those overall company goals. And then we have personal performance goals that then support the department goals. So it's kind of cascaded down until it reaches individual level. So we hopefully have some individual performance goals that we are working towards, which will then support the department goals and the company goals. Um, and then we need to make sure that our development plan supports both strands of that. So if we know where we want to get to in terms of our career, and we know what we need to support with in terms of the business goals, then we're in a position to write a development plan that can support both of those strands. And that's essentially what we're going to look at. So if we think about who plays what roles within these, well, the employee has a huge role. Obviously, we should be sort of making sure we understand and helping write our goals for the department, helping talk about how we can contribute towards the overall goals. And we're obviously working towards the success of those as well. Um, but we are very much involved in the writing of those plans, and we're identifying what support and development we need along the way. But of course, the manager plays a big role within that as well. So for those that are managers here, and for those that want to know what their managers should be doing, there needs to be some clarity about what those expectations are, setting challenging targets for people, and making sure managers should be making sure that employees are aware of what is expected of them, but also the things that can impact their ability to be able to do that. Of course, there's motivation and commitments from the manager as well, and also providing coaching along the way. So let's start with the first part of it around career planning. Well, in terms of career planning, this is such an important step because we have to understand the big picture where we want to get to if we want to write those development plans for the short term. So these are the sorts of questions we can be asking. So it could be, I mean, it says 6 months to 2 years here, but it could be even longer than that. But these are the sorts of questions that we should be thinking about when we're writing our career statement or doing some career planning. Where do I want to be? What do I need to get there? Where am I now? And what do I want to do more and less of? So we're thinking about Short, sort of, where do I want to be in the medium to long term? Where do I want to grow to? What do I aspire to be doing? That doesn't have to mean a promotion, anything like that. It could just be, what kind of things I want to be doing. Even like, we could be a sideways step, a change in function, a change in role, anything like that. What do we need to get there? So here's where we might think, well, where am I now? What if I want to get here? Where am I now? Am I close to achieving that? What skills am I missing to be able to do that? One of the things I quite often say to people on this one is, if you know you want to achieve a certain position, a certain role, a certain function, what's stopping you doing it right now? If that job became available tomorrow, what would stop you getting there? And then that's a way of thinking about what you need to do. Why wouldn't you be hired for that role tomorrow? And that might be skills, experience, what it is. Because that's what you can write in your development plan. Go and get some experience in this area. Go and develop your skills in this area. Sometimes it's just how you're perceived by people, and then actually your development plan is showing off what you can do. And it just helps you recognise what the gaps are between where you are now and where you want to be. So that's what we're thinking is, where am I now? What strengths can I use? What do I need to get to the end goal? And then lastly, it's about what we enjoy. So rather than, just that ambition side, well, what is it that you like about what you're doing now? What do you enjoy doing? What do you want more of? What do you want less of? So that's one of the big things that we can be doing. So I'm interested to know, how many of you have written a career statement. Let me just run this poll for you. Hopefully you can see that. So has anyone completed a career statement before? Is it something you use? Let's see the results coming in, which is good. Okay, so everyone's voted. I'll just share the results there. So looks like most of you haven't used a career statement, or certainly aren't using one now. So it's definitely one to think about. This is a huge part of understanding. It's really hard to write a development plan if we don't know what we're aiming for. So I would hope, and obviously it isn't happening, that your manager would sit down with you and take you through a career statement and have a conversation with you, because they need to know as well. They need to know how they can support you in achieving your end goals. But if they don't, prompt them, have the conversation, or at least have this conversation with yourself and work out where you want to get to. But really, ideally, sit down with your manager and have a conversation about it. So that's the career goal side of thing, and that is the starting point. The second part is, if we think about it, like I said, is personal and business side of things. So that's the personal side. So if we know that, we can think about what development we need to support us with those career goals. And those gaps that we identified that's stopping us getting where we want to, we can build those into our development plan later on. Now, in terms of the company side of it, it's first of all, it's all about goal setting. So if we understand our goals, I mean, it's all about the purpose, understanding the purpose and the mission of the company. What is it we want to achieve as a company? What's the grand sort of big picture things? What's our strategy to achieve that? Like, what is the plan for the business to do that? And then what are the values that underpin it, that bring it to life and make sure we're doing it in the right way? Now, this is such an important part. It's sort of widely researched and understood that if people understand where they fit in an organization and how they support those big picture goals and the overall mission, we are just way more engaged in delivering it. So it's really important we understand it, and if we're managers, it's important our teams understand what that big picture mission is, but then also how we support on that. So yes, once we understand the company goals, we need to build those department goals, and then those personal performance goals as well. Now, to do that, it's really important that we are clear about what the targets are, if you like, what the objectives are. So whether that's as a manager setting goals, or whether that's us as individuals understanding our goals, it's really clear that we use SMART to to measure that, to set those targets within the goals. So again, I don't know if people are familiar with SMART. If you haven't seen this, it's a fairly standard way of setting targets, but it's really important that we use it. So really important that we're specific about what is it we're trying to achieve, making sure we're really clear on what is it that's expected of us when we set those personal business goals. The fact that they're measurable, what is the metric that's going to sort of define whether we've succeeded or not? That's really important as well. We need to know, we need to have a clearly defined measure that says, yes, we achieved it, or no, we didn't. So we've got something to aim towards, apart from it being clear and that whether or not we've achieved success. It's really helpful in terms of motivation if we've got something to strive towards. It needs to be attainable. I said earlier on, it needs to be sort of challenging. The role of the manager is to set challenging targets, and that's true. But they need to be attainable as well. If we set unrealistic targets, people aren't motivated to achieve them. Need to be relevant, need to be out the goals that we have. And by the way, if you've seen SMART, you might have seen realistic as the R, and that is one version, but realistic and attainable are kind of the same thing. So I prefer this one. Relevant is all about, is the goal that you're setting yourself supporting, is it relevant to the business? Is it supporting the department goal? And is that supporting the company goal? Because if not, why are we focusing on that? We should be really streamlining. As I said earlier, less is more. Let's prioritize the goals that we're setting for ourselves or for others, and make sure that they are targeted and relevant to help the big picture success. So we should be checking in to make sure that any goals we're setting support the overall goal for the department or the organization. And then finally, time bound. So we should have a deadline within it, maybe milestones as well along the way, but certainly an end time frame by when we should be achieving these goals. So we're setting these clear goals, and when we're doing that, we are using these different measurements. Now, when we're using SMART targets to create our goals, this actually can be quite challenging. So sometimes it's just really hard to put a measurement on it. And these are typically the four measurements we would use. So quantity, it might be to achieve a certain amount of something. So maybe it's, I don't know, to have 100 conversations with new clients, or maybe it's to make 50 phone calls, or to write 6 reports a month, or whatever it might be. It's about quantity, and that is one way of setting a target. Quality I'll come back to. Money is another one. We might be looking to achieve certain sales, certain profits, or saving costs, and we'd put a financial target on something. Or time. So obviously time, this is slightly different to the time bound that we just talked about in terms of the end, the end target time. This is where we'd be targeting time. So maybe it's speeding up a process. Maybe it's reducing the call waiting time, or how quickly we do something. It's around setting time targets. And then, like I said, quality. That's a bit more tricky, isn't it? If we're trying to set a quality target, if you said to someone, "I want you to write a report," and you're trying to define how good it needs to be, well, that's really hard to do. So this is where actually we need to sometimes be a bit creative. If we're setting ourselves or someone else a target around quality, we need to get creative sometimes, or very specific. So creative or specific, and by that I mean we can either be creative by finding a way to measure something. So it might be that if it's quality, we're getting feedback. For example, we know on our sessions we'll send a survey out and get feedback on the quality of our sessions afterwards. Things like that, that's going to help us assess that quality. But that wouldn't help in that writing a report for me, would it? So that's where we have to be as specific as we can be, and say really define what quality looks like. Right, it should be written in these sections. It should be to a level where I don't have to make fundamental changes, or whatever it was, just as clear as we can be. That makes some effort. Remember, the whole point of SMART targets is that the employee and the manager are both on the same page, and there's no surprises at the end. Everyone knows what's expected. So yeah, that's what we should be doing, is using those measurements. So once we're clear on what we're achieving, we've got these company goals, we've got these department goals, we've got our own goals. We know how we're supporting the department goals. We're clear. We've got these SMART targets, and again, it shouldn't be too many. Let's aim for less is more. Or it's better to achieve 5 things than not achieve 20. So yeah, clear goals along the way. The next part is about how we do it as well. So there is a real danger of just focusing on the result. What do you think? I'll ask you to share in the chat here. What do you think the danger is of just focusing on that result? Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, a lack of quality, maybe. Yeah. If we're just chasing numbers, yeah. Anyone else? What else? Why? What's the danger of just focusing, like being so headstrong? All we're going after is that target, that result. What other things might happen in the across the team and in the business? Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, yeah, exactly that. We don't achieve it in the right way, so there's a real risk that if we're not careful, we don't achieve it in the right way, and it damages the way we work, the team culture, if you like. Yeah, no clear plan on how to get there. Yeah, other elements exactly that as well. So if we're chasing one result, it can impact in other areas, and that's a really important point. So um, we need to make sure we are doing it in the right way, in a way that it builds on long term success, doesn't damage other areas, and doesn't damage the team culture. And that's why the values are so important. You know, it's so important. So being aware of your company values, but not just what they are. There's a great quote from Simon Sinek about we only live. We can only say we have a strong company culture when we take our values off the wall and live and breathe them. Actually, that's what it's all about. It's not just knowing, oh, these are the values, it's understanding how they fit within things. So when we're setting our goals, it's understanding what's the right way to achieve them as well. So these are the things we want to be thinking about when we're setting goals for ourselves. And again, we're not at development plans yet. We're still thinking about business goals, personal goals that support the business. This is what things we should be thinking about. So of course they're going to be aligned to the company and team goals, like we said earlier, but they should be personalized. We should all have our own way of contributing towards the team goals that's specific to us, and our role or our strengths. So that's the first thing. The next thing should be agreed. This should be a very collaborative process, so the manager can challenge and ask questions, but really we want to get us as individuals, the employee, to be setting our own goals if we can. We can take ownership then if we can suggest what we can achieve. Our goals should be everyday and stretch. Some of our goals should be just doing the day to day, and some of them should be around stretch targets about how we move the business or the team forwards. Should be continuous, so we're always looking to grow and move things forwards, and building on them. We're replacing goals with other goals all the time. And then finally, as I said, the what and the how, considering how we do things as well. So when it comes to having some of those conversations, it's about setting the business context. And if we're receiving these, we should be make sure that this is the kind of conversations we're having. Do we understand the full business context? Do we understand how we are supporting the overall? Then we should look to collaboratively create the goal with those SMART targets, so that us and the manager are completely aligned on what's expected. And then really clarify these expectations in terms of, okay, being very clear, using SMART to make sure we're on the same page. We should then explore potential challenges. What might get in the way? And this is going to very much help us write those development plans, because we're going to start to identify what are the blockers and what are our skills that are going to help us get past those blockers, or maybe those skills gaps that we need to plan for. And that's the important part when it comes to development plans. And then finally, part of that goal setting conversation is around the support and review progress. So thinking about what is it, how do we check in, how often do we need support, how often do we need to check in, who's initiating those conversations, and just agreeing that up front. So these are the things we should be talking about when we're setting our personal goals towards the business. So we've now got our career goals. We know where we want to get to in terms of our personal growth, but also we know how we're going to support the company and the department through our personal performance goals. So it kind of that's what we need as a starting point to be able to write our development plans, because we're in both cases identifying the gaps that stop us delivering on our career growth plans or our personal performance goals. So when it comes to development plans, we need to, understand what is it that we can do to find out where those gaps exist. So what is it? I mean, I've already touched on a couple in the stuff we've talked about so far, but what do you personally use? Again, I'll ask you to share in the chat here. What do you personally use to identify your own, strengths and weaknesses, where your skills and knowledge lie, and where your gaps in those areas lie? How do you currently identify that? Share in the chat for me. What is it you do? Yeah, absolutely. Listening to feedback for colleagues. Yeah, and I think that's a great one, Claire. And not just listening, but actually asking for it as well. It's one of those things where um, most of us don't enjoy getting constructive feedback, but it really helps us. And I guess it's remembering why we're doing it. It's going to help us grow. The purpose of feedback is to improve performance, not to make us feel better. So it's about being bold enough, being brave enough to ask for feedback, soliciting it in different situations, to try and recognise what we can do to improve. Absolutely. Um, Feedback conversations, yes, absolutely. So similar again, and self-reflection. You know what? That's my absolute favourite one. Great. I've just done a post on it on LinkedIn this morning around the power of self-reflection. It's the if you only take away one thing later on when we talk about how to bring this to life, that's one of the biggest things, is just taking a bit of time to take stock, reflect on what we've done well, what we haven't done well, what we would do differently, what support or skills we need. Yeah, just taking some time to stop and think is a great one. Online self-assessments, yeah, there's a lot of stuff nowadays where you can go online, a lot of tools where you can go and I guess answer questions or complete assessments that identify gaps in skills and knowledge. By starting a project and something I'm learning, yeah, nice one, Theo. Yeah, absolutely. It's that's a nice way of, I guess, identifying where those gaps are and recognizing strengths. If we start a project on something we're learning, it helps us practice and get better at things, but also it identifies those gaps as well. And coaching and mentoring, yeah, absolutely. So having someone that can provide that level of support and help us identify how we could make improvements. Yeah, all lovely ways of doing that. Absolutely. So that's one of the things we need to think about before we get into writing development plans, is really reflecting on all of these ways to build self-awareness. And like I said, go back to those two things we said earlier. Think about career plans. If I wanted this role, or I want to get to here, what is it that's stopping me? If the job came up tomorrow, why wouldn't I get it? That's a nice question to have to figure out. What is it I need to be tapping into and targeting? The second one around personal development goals. Right, I need to achieve this quarter to support the business. What is it I don't know how to do? Or what is it I need more practice doing? Or as Theo said, like getting on a project to support and get some experience. What is it? Where are those gaps on those two sides? That's the first thing. And then the other thing to think about is the fact that, we all have different strengths. This Einstein quote, everyone's a genius, but if we judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid. So we need to think about, just because we're not great at something, it doesn't mean we have to put it in a development plan. So what I mean by that is, first of all, I think we a lot of the time I see people saying, no, I'm really not good at this, I need to get better at it. But actually, if you've got no desire to work in that space and you've got no goals towards that in that area, maybe you don't. Maybe you don't need to get better at that. Maybe you're fine without that skill. And actually, even if your goals do include that skill, maybe you can utilize the team around you. That's what a team is for, to have a mixture of strengths, a mixture of superpowers, if you like, that you can tap into and support each other. Maybe a different skill can help you utilize people in the team for the skill you're not so good at. So maybe it's about ramping up an existing skill rather than trying to fix one that maybe you're not strong at. So, hey, I'm not saying don't target opportunities. A lot of the time, that is the answer, but don't just jump down that path. Think about it carefully and think about what is going to have the biggest impact. Sometimes it's about focusing on our strengths and not just our weaknesses to put into our development plans and becoming an absolute expert at something instead. So when it comes to writing our development plans, we need to think about how we're going to support it. So the first thing, as I said, we've just identified. In fact, before we even get to this slide, let me just go back so it's still talking about that one. When we've identified what our plans are, what you hopefully end up with is a whole list of things you could fix and a whole list of things that you're already good at that you could enhance. And that list will be derived from your self-reflection, those feedback conversations, things like that, but also that career plan. When I'm thinking about my career plan, I might have identified 5 reasons I'm not going to get that job, and 5 things I need to work on. When I'm looking at my performance goals, I might be thinking, actually, there's 5 things here I need to work on to be good at that. And then I might have had a whole load of stuff from here. So I might end up with 10, 20 things that I could work on this year in terms of my personal development. And obviously, we're not going to try and do all of that. If we try and do all of it, we'll achieve none of it. So we need to prioritize first of all and think, okay, which ones are going to have the greatest impact and which ones are most urgent, if you like. What do I need this quarter? What do I need this year? Let me focus on those ones first. Now, it might be that when you assessed where you are in terms of being able to deliver on your performance goals this year, you might have said, do you know what? I don't need any support. I know how to do all of this stuff. I don't need any development to be able to achieve my goals this quarter, this year. If that's the case, great. Do you know what that means? It means you can focus more on the things that are going to help your growth in your career instead. You can focus on the things that you're interested in and you love doing and you want to grow in rather than the things you have to. So you can prioritize 2 or 3 goals in that area. It might be the other way around though. It might be, actually, I need to upskill to be able to deliver this quarter. So let me put my career ones on hold for a bit because right now I've got to focus on these. So this quarter I'm going to kind of develop myself in a way that supports my performance goals. Or hopefully it's a mixture between the two. We've got some development opportunities that are going to help us grow for the business and some that are going to help us grow as an individual. But either way, we hopefully prioritize just 2 or 3 areas, maybe even 1, and certainly don't go mad on this, just a few key areas that we want to prioritize our development in. And then once we've done that, we need to think about how we're going to do it, and that's where blended learning comes in. So it's long accepted that we learn in different ways, and actually where a lot of people fall down is they think formal learning is the answer to everything. I'll attend a course, I'll do some e-learning, whatever it might be, and that will solve my problem. Well, of course it doesn't. Formal learning only makes up 10% of the way we learn. Yes, it gives us that base understanding and that base knowledge, and it's really important, but actually 20% of the learning comes from learning from other people. So whether that is the coaching and mentoring that Lorraine mentioned earlier, or whether it is reading books from other people, having conversations, sitting with someone, observing what they're doing, whatever it might be. 20% comes from learning from other people, and 70% comes from learning in the role. Practice makes perfect. Jose, I think it was Theo mentioned working on projects. Yeah, exactly. Learning in the role, learning by doing, is certainly one thing that's going to is going to help us hugely. And when we're writing our development plans, this is crucial because quite often, if you look at a standard development plan, it says attend this course, do this learning, or at best it might say learn from so and so, like this learning from others piece. Very rarely do you see a development plan that says take ownership for this project. Practice doing this, and that's the learning in role piece. The development plan should absolutely have those behavioural bits that allow us to practice. or it doesn't work. I mean, it's the reason it's the reason I never get around to learning pivot tables in Excel, because I'll teach myself once and then I don't keep doing it, so it doesn't stick, and I have to keep doing it again. So it's about how do you give yourself responsibility for something that you've learned so that you have to keep using it. So these are some of the things, some of the areas you could think about in terms of the 10, the 70, 20, and 10. So 10% formal learning, as I said earlier, it's those courses, workshops, seminars, um, e-learning, professional qualifications, that sort of stuff. 20% getting feedback, we've already mentioned, so whether that's coaching, mentoring, 360s, one-to-ones, all those sorts of things. Networking, the more you can build those networks, the more you can learn from other people and shadow people, observe them, and yeah, structured mentoring. And then 70% that doing. So yeah, it's asking for, right, if I'm going to develop, I need some exposure in this area. Can I take ownership for this? When's the last time you asked for that? Go out and ask. I really want to get better at this. Can I have this new responsibility that allows me to practice doing it and to make decisions in that area? Learning through real situations. So, applying, learning, practicing doing things in real life and thinking about how you do it, and then creating new experiences. So, can you go and, maybe work in another department for a couple of days and learn more there? Can you sit with an expert or take part in a project, a working group? Yeah, take ownership for things. These are all things we can do to bring it to life, and they're the things where we have real rich learning experiences. So it makes sense that we build that into our personal development plans. So this is how simple it should look. I mean, again, I see all sorts of complicated development plans. It really doesn't need to be. So for me, it's two things. One, don't have too many things on there. Prioritize. There might be 10 things you want to learn this year, but actually just pick a couple. Pick one, two, or three. And honestly, if you find you write three development goals and you find yourself not doing it, change it. Just do two or one. Because if it's too much, and we said earlier on about attainable. If we set too much for ourselves and it's unrealistic for us to do it, we don't go, oh, we'll do some of it. We just give up. We just don't do any of it. So set something that's realistic, even if you just start with one. So set yourself one goal. In this example here, I've said about improving Microsoft Excel, whatever. That's just an example. And then just think, how am I going to bring that to life? So what formal learning do I need? And you don't always need formal learning, by the way, but it's helpful to think, is there formal learning I need? So I might attend an Excel course. I might go online and do an Excel course. 20% learning from others. Well, maybe Suzanne in my team is brilliant at Microsoft Excel. So wouldn't it make sense that I spend some time sitting with Suzanne and learning from her, getting her, to take me through some top tips, and just watching how she uses Excel with her projects. And then 70%, take on, maybe if I take on a way of tracking something, in this case, fundraising, whatever it might be, tracking something that allows me to use those Excel skills. So I'm taking ownership for something. I'm taking on responsibility for a project or just a part of a role within our team that allows me to practice using those skills. And that's as simple as it is. So you just plan that in. Obviously, ideally, you can plan in some dates and stuff. But if what we really want is to have conversations, which we'll come to later, having conversations that keep this alive, so that you're challenging yourself, and hopefully your manager will have those conversations with you where they hold you accountable for your own personal development. If not, get a personal development buddy. Find someone in your team you want to challenge each other, that's going to keep you honest on this stuff and say, oh, what happened to that Excel course? Have you booked it yet? Did you book that time with Suzanne? Find someone that's going to challenge you on it. But yeah, this is how simple it needs to be. Really straightforward. 1, 2, 3 maximum. How is it supported with 10, 20, and 70%? That's all we're looking for. So I think I had a poll. Obviously, I've lost my second screen now, so I'm gonna try it and run a poll. I think is this the one? We'll soon find out. Yes, there we go. So who does currently have a structured development plan that is reviewed and updated? Is it, do you have one and it's reviewed and updated regularly? Do you have one but it's not regularly reviewed, or do you not have a plan at all? You can see that poll question there. Give you another second in case the others want to answer, and then I'll share results. Okay, great. So these are the results. So yeah, okay, do you know what? That's really positive that most of you do have a plan. If you don't, however, that was fine. Don't worry about it. This is why you're here today. So it's you're starting from scratch. You can work through as in the way I've talked about today. But if you do, brilliant. And I love that half of you are reviewing it regularly. That's great as well. If you're not, just all I would say is if it's not being regularly reviewed and updated, just ask yourself why, and hold yourself accountable a little bit and say what's stopping that happening. Is it that feel free to share it in the chat if you want to tell us why. But if is it because you don't have time, in which case maybe it is about planning in that time if you can, or maybe it's too much to plan in which case maybe that you need to think about reducing it and doing a bit less. Or maybe it's you haven't got the support of your manager. Well, find someone that you trust to support you. Maybe it doesn't have to be your manager; it could be anyone else that could support. So, yeah, they're the things I'd suggest thinking about if you're not managing to keep it alive. So let's move on. So we've now sort of worked through this process. So we've taken some time to stop and reflect on where we want to be in terms of our career goals. We've taken the time to understand what our performance goals are in terms of contributing towards our department, our team, and also the overall company. And then you can see now how that development plan supports both of those. So if we flip it, we can flip this around almost and have it the other way around and say, if we get our personal development plan right, actually that supports it enables us to deliver our performance goals, which then enables our department to succeed, which then allows the company to deliver on its goals. So if everyone had a development plan that upskilled enough to deliver on our performance goals, you can imagine if everyone delivered on their goals, the company would do really well. And then on the other side of it, if we're working on our opportunities that we know we need to grow in, then that's going to help us get to where we want to in terms of our career as well. So, this is where it's all sort of coming back together and delivering what our end goals were. So then it's about keeping it alive. What do you do? Again, I'll ask you to share in the chat here. What is it you do that helps keep it alive? What kind of things do you do? So I remember half of you said that it is alive, so that's good. What are you doing that works for you, or what do you think we could be doing to keep our personal development plans alive? Yeah, okay. So yeah, good stuff. So meet with a line manager to review progress and next steps. Yeah, absolutely, really good. Yeah, and Claire, just out of interest, if you don't mind, how regular is that? How often do you meet? Um, that's always an interesting one. Anyone else? What else do you do to every week? Okay, great, nice, that's good. Yeah. It doesn't have to be, by the way, for others that aren't doing that. You'll find a time frame that works for you. Um, but I think the important word in that is regular. So if it's regular and monthly, that's fine. If it's regular and it's weekly, that's fine. But I think having that regular touch point, consistent, is so important. Okay, so here's some of the top tips from us for keeping it alive. One-to-ones, as Claire just said there, having those one-to-one conversations where you sit down, quite relaxed. The coffee cup icon gives it away. Hopefully quite an informal discussion, a bit of a chat. Now, when I speak to people, quite often I'll have a weekly catch up with my manager, and we'll discuss, where I am with my goals, where I'm progressing, but actually don't always dive into the development side of things and their personal development and how that's going to support that. So just make sure that's a part of it. And it might just be that actually I have a weekly meeting with my manager to talk about where I am with my goals. And once a month, it's a slightly longer meeting and we dive into my personal development. And I know a lot of people that have started doing that sort of approach where it's maybe an hour a week or half an hour a week, but that time is doubled once a month so that it allows enough time to have a personal development conversation, and get some real honest feedback and so on. So it might just be that those you vary the length of those, based on what you're going to cover. Feedback, yes, we should be, getting feedback from people, and asking for feedback, but also really listening to it and taking on board when we receive feedback. Super important. And as I said earlier, it is about asking for feedback. If we know the areas that we want to improve in, then we can ask for specifics. No, not everyone will know what we're trying to work on, so they might not offer us the feedback in the way we'd like to learn. So we know what we're working on. So go and ask people. Say, no, I'm really trying to work on my communication skills. Can you tell me, over the last month, what you think I've done well and what you think I could have done better in terms of communication? Or I've been really trying to work on whatever my proofreading skills or whatever. It could be anything. But if we're specific about feedback when we request it, we're more likely to get useful feedback. If you just say to someone, "Can you give me some feedback?" It's really broad. So target the things you're working on, and ask them in advance as well. Say, "Look, I'm really trying to work on my presenting skills. I know you're in this meeting with me, so can you just watch?" And specifically, this is the part I'm presenting that I'm trying to improve. So can you keep an eye on my body language or whatever it is? Being specific about it and in advance can help people give you really useful feedback. Self-reflections, taking the time. Someone said earlier on about putting time aside for self-reflection. So important. And it could just be 15 minutes a week or half an hour a month. Literally just put it in a diary, put it at a time where you're not going to delete it, because we all know that they'll probably be the first thing you delete in favor of a more important meeting, as we would say, something that would get put out there. So think about, is it the Tuesday afternoon, or when is it you'll keep that 15 minutes in there and you'll just stop and reflect and think, what have I done this week? How has it contributed towards my personal development plans? How has it contributed towards my performance goals? How has it contributed towards my career progression? And then just thinking about for the next week, what would I do differently? What can I change? What do I need to, or how do I continue to build on what I've done so far? So just book that time in, put it in the diary, and make sure you keep to it. And then peer input. So not just feedback from senior management or your line manager. Actually, it's peer-to-peer stuff. It's getting them to give you feedback, but also input into what they think, where you can develop, and also supporting you with that development as well. So these are all things we can do to keep it alive. And actually, I've got another poll question for you here. Who do you think, if I go back, who do you think should own your development plan? Should it be you as the individual, or do you think it should be the manager? Okay, mostly voted. I'll share the results there. So actually, do you know what? I'm really pleased to see that, because that's what I 100% agree with you. It is the individual has to own their development plan. They have to. The manager should offer all the support they could possibly provide, but it's got to be owned by the individual, or nothing will happen. And there's a number of reasons for that. I mean, I've seen managers that try to write development plans for their whole team, and it just falls down. Like, if everyone writes their own development plan, well, we've only got to write one. If the manager writes it, they have to write multiple, and then it loses personalization, it loses feeling, it loses understanding, and it just ends up being rushed. The individual needs to write it themselves, yes, with the support and with the feedback and the guidance of the manager, but the individual should write it, they should own it, they should initiate conversations. So in those one-to-ones, when we talk about one-to-ones, do you bring your development plan to that one-to-one and say, to give you an update, this is what I've done so far. I've booked that Excel course and I've spent an hour with Suzanne. Now I'd like to take ownership for this project. Or do you wait to be asked about it and to be told about it? Because that's what I want you thinking about, is taking the ownership and initiative. Imagine if someone that worked for you came to you and said, right, didn't even wait in that one-to-one. They didn't wait to be told how they're getting on or asked. They walked in and went, right, here's my here's my personal goals towards the department. Here's where I am. Here's the progress update. We're 60% through this, and I've got a meeting coming up next week to finish the rest of that one. This is where I am on this one. This one we can't start yet, but that will start next month. It's all in hand, you know. And in terms of my personal development, well, we obviously know that this is something I needed to work on. So I've done this, I've done that, and this is what I've got planned for the coming month. Imagine what your thoughts would be about that person. Wow, self-starter, proactive, really, you know, really motivated, someone that's going to go and perform, all those positive vibes you get from someone that comes in, owning that conversation, leading that conversation. Well, that's what I challenge you to be like. So, you know, go in, lead the conversation. Don't wait to be asked or told about performance plans or development plans. Go in and own it and lead the conversation and say, here's the update. Here's my list of goals. Here's how I'm delivering on them. Here's what I'm working on. And this is where I need your support. And then exactly the same with development plans. Just comes across so much more authoritative, more assertive, more confident. So yeah, it really puts you in a good light. And then yeah, so those one-to-ones. Choose your attitude. That kind of links into what I've just said. Own it. Go in with a really positive attitude, but also go in to be ready to take on constructive feedback. So I know that I've always struggled with this. Is take it, you know, it's very easy, especially if you've got pride in your work, to take feedback personally, but don't take it as a chance to improve. And one of the things someone told me once a long time ago, when someone was my boss was giving me feedback on something that I didn't think I was bad at, someone said to me, well, that's great then. You're already good at it. You just need to show you're good at it. So, you know, don't be defensive on it. Just take it on board. Yep, great, got it. Go away and show it more. So, you know, take that positive attitude, lead the meeting, and then be really open to feedback. Second one, protect the time. And you might need support from your manager when you're doing this, but make sure there's enough time put aside. There's nothing worse than running out of time in a one-to-one. You know, because people get upset by that. You know, I would if we're really talking about my development, my growth, and I run out of time, that's going to upset me. So make sure there's enough time aside, and you'll know from experience about how long things take. Prepare in advance. That kind of goes back again to what I said about if you're going to go and talk through your updates in terms of your business goals and your development goals. Well, you need to prepare what you're going to say in advance. Recognize, have a sort of progress update ready, and prepare for what might come out of that meeting as well. And then ask questions, be inquisitive, you know, solicit feedback, ask them for specific feedback on how you're doing, ask them for what you could do more of, ask them how they can support you, you know, be ready to ask those questions. So we come pretty much to the end of the session. We've got, obviously, I'll give you my top tips on what's next, and then we've got 5 minutes if there are any questions. But this is what I would say to you: go away and have a go at it. And if you've got a team and you're thinking about bringing this to life as well, my advice would be work through the process for yourself first, so you fully understand it, and then then start doing it with your team. But for yourself, first one, career planning statement. So just take some time to go through where is it you want to get to, what's stopping you right now, what are the gaps, what are your strengths, what are the gaps, and also what do you enjoy doing. So have that conversation with your manager, but just importantly, a bit of reflection for yourself about where do I want to get to. Then on the other side of it, the business side, if you don't know what your company's mission is, what it's trying to achieve, if you don't know your department goals and you don't know how you contribute towards them, that's on you to go and find out. So go and find out what the goals are. Go and find out how you contribute towards them, and think about how you can contribute. If you haven't been given personal goals towards that, ask. Go and say, oh, this is how I think I can offer value, and set those goals. And when you do that, think about the what and the how, and use SMART. So, what are the values you're going to use alongside it? And think about using SMART: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. When we're writing those goals, so that we're really clear on what it is that's expected. And then once we've done that, we know our career planning and what we're trying to achieve for the business. Then we can write those 10, 20, 70 development plans. So blended plans. Remember, prioritize. We find out what gaps we've got for our career and for our business goals. Prioritize down to 3 maximum, and then set your formal learning, your learning from others, and your learning in role, your 10, 20, 70, just one or two things under each of those headings about how you're going to bring it to life and really make sure you're learning. And then most importantly of all, look at some of those techniques for bringing it to life. So schedule those one-to-ones and put enough time aside. And even if it's monthly on development plans and weekly on everything else, whatever, just get something in regular. Schedule some reflection time, 15 minutes a week or half an hour a month. That's all it needs. Put it in your diary as a recurring thing, so you make sure you're doing it. We spend so much time supporting the business that we work for. Give 15 minutes to yourself. This is just about your growth. So just give some time to yourself. And then finally, that feedback piece. Get used to receiving feedback and being open to working on it. So they're my top tips. I am open to questions. Fire them off in the chat if you'd like. If there are any questions, please do share them in the chat. But otherwise, thank you very much for joining. And we hope to see you on another webinar soon.